Dr. Kavin Mistry, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, glad to be here, Jack.
I'm excited to have you here. And we're going to dive into one mystery straight away. So, there's more technology than ever, more information than ever, but it seems to be diseases like cardiovascular disease, loneliness, depression. People are dying sooner than they should. So, what's going on? What are we missing? We've got all this information, but yet health isn't getting better.
Yes. Yeah, it's a paradox, right, Jack, that we're facing, that we're progressing so much in terms of health technology,
Mm,
yet we're seeing more of these chronic diseases. And it's one of the, I guess, downsides of modernity that I've been noticing. And I've been in the field of radiology for 25 years. When I tell people from a radiologist perspective, you can lie to me to my face, but you can't lie to me on my screen because I see right through you, right? And literally, I see right through you, right? Uh, and what I've been seeing is definitely accelerated aging in the films. So we have 30, 40-year-olds whose brains and bodies look like they're 60 and 70.
mm,
And when I first started and I looked at people's brains and I saw that accelerated aging, I saw all the degenerative diseases in people's bones and spines and joints. And these were young patients, 30, 40-year-olds. As a young radiologist, as a young doctor, I started questioning. I said, I used to ask my attendings, I used to ask my senior residents, I said, what's going on? How come this guy looks like this? And they would be like, oh, just read the damn film, right? Now stop asking these questions. And it stuck with me. I said, isn't that counterintuitive, right? Here we are in medicine as a doctor. We're in this profession to heal people, right? And on this film, I'm seeing this guy who has accelerated aging, and we're not asking the question, why did he get there? How did he get there? What can we do to reverse it? I said, like, isn't that our whole MO, what isn't that our whole process here of like healing people? And so Jack, it took me on this deep dive where I started looking at things that work, things that don't work. And one of the things that surprised me was when I would see an 80-year-old whose brain looks like it's 40.
mm,
I said that guy is doing something right, right?
mm.
Either it's not all genetics, it's something that he's doing in terms of lifestyle. And so I started collecting these switches that people are flipping on to reverse their biological age. And I tell people that essentially what I've discovered is you are essentially in the cockpit of your genome.
Mm,
And you have access to all these switches that can either promote your health or degrade your health. And over the course of time, looking at many, many different parameters, many, many different switches that people can turn on and off, I landed on seven key paradigms and seven key, I guess, master switches, which if you flip on, will significantly impact your biological age.
mm.
And hence the book, Primal Health Design, and it's seven key paradigms to reverse your biological age.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely loving the book. But before we go there, I love how curious you are, and I think people like you are like that are curious and ask those questions that no one else is asking. Like you're just in that environment, everybody's just doing their job, doing the scans, looking at the scans, giving the results. But you're like the outlier that asks those questions. You're curious. So can you
Right.
just tell me a little bit more about your upbringing before we dive into the book and how people can actually start living younger age at a younger age? Tell us about you.
Yeah, so I was born in India, and my dad was working for the United Nations. And what that amounted to was I've changed 22 houses in my lifetime. So I've lived all over the world. Part of my childhood was in Africa, East Africa, Tanzania, where his work was involved a lot of rural projects, and part of it was him interacting with some of the native tribes And as a child, was there. I picked up the local language, Swahili. I could communicate with the locals. They speak their own specific click language, but
Mm.
They understood Swahili. I picked up Swahili, so I became a medium. I could communicate with the tribe. I could communicate with my parents. I could communicate with the locals. It was beautiful. So
Mm.
so I got to learn, and I got to learn how these people behave, how these primal cultures were behaving. And fast forward, all this moving around with my dad's career, everything like that. Africa, a little bit in Europe, India, everything, and then finally ending up here. And fast forward, I go into medicine, go into radiology, and seeing all these things. And it was interesting. The first time I started digging deep into this longevity research and everything like that, and they said, there are certain places in the world, there are certain primitive cultures that have very low incidence of chronic diseases, and particularly this one tribe in East Africa, Tanzania. And I said, really, East Africa? And I said, I was there, so I'm looking at the map, and then I go, okay, there, and they're pointing to this area, and I go, that's where I was. That's the tribe I was with. And it's the funniest thing. You see how like kind of things connect. And so this tribe I hung out with, turns out they are one of the the tribes that are one of the highest studied tribes for longevity. And at that time, I never knew what they were. I never knew their name. I was just, to me, it was just, just people living in Africa. And so then I could go back and say, okay, what did they do? How was my childhood? What did we do? What did we eat? How did they behave? And so I could draw all these parallels in terms of longevity and then draw them back and then create daily rituals and practices that people could implement.
That's amazing. It's just like it's meant to be. You've been to that tribe and then you've gone down the journey that you went down. That's amazing. I've wanted to do a little bit of travel to these blue zones myself and figure out what is happening there. Uh, I assume the states are very similar to Australia, but there's a big trend at the moment, people turning to medications like Ozempic and things like that instead of doing the things they know that will help them live a long, healthy, happy life that will go over in the book. In the tribes, have they got medications? Are they using medications? And if they're not, why do you think they're not using medications?
So one of the things, Jack, I noticed is the people would age very naturally. They were dying of just old age. They would just get old, and it was just a natural, death was just a natural conclusion, but not a premature, painful end to the life, as if people, here where they're stuck in the ICU intubated because they have chronic lung disease or kidney failure or heart disease and are on they have these nasogastric tubes, endotracheal tubes. It doesn't happen. They're just there. It's a culture where people are just connected with the land and connected with all these natural the natural environment in terms of just the sun and land and food. And so they are really not on any major pharmaceuticals. A lot of their treatment is just, they know certain herbs that help with this or that, but they're not dependent on any commercial pharmaceuticals at all.
Mm. Yeah, it's crazy especially when it comes to death. Like I said, I've been diving into this longevity thing for a while now as well.
Yeah.
And I think people mistake living longer with living better. Like, it doesn't matter about living longer, it's just the quality of your life that matters more. And I think people sort of mix that up a little bit and want to live forever, but the quality of life might not necessarily be the same, and they're holding on and trying to do whatever they can possibly do. And you've said this in your content a little bit about aging from the inside, and people try to age from the outside. They do all this thing like whatever it is to their outside of their body, but they don't really think about the inside. and that's what matters more. What is up, everybody? Obviously, if you'd lasted this long in the episode, you are enjoying it, and you must be passionate about finding your true form and living a life true to you. I know in this episode, Kavin Mistry is covering 7 strategies that you should be implementing out of his book, but I've got 9 for you to start implementing. Over the last 265 episodes, these 9 strategies, hacks, tips, things that you should be doing pop up every time, every episode, every guest I get on. They keep coming up over and over again. So I've combined them into one free PDF for you to download. I cover why it's important, why you need it, but most importantly, how to start implementing it. Information's awesome, but if you don't know how to actually implement it into your day-to-day life, it's kind of useless. And it's all in there, it's all free. What I recommend is obviously finish this episode, then download my guide with 9 strategies that will help you live a long, healthy, happy life, boost your energy, boost your focus, just start smashing life. And if you still want to dive deeper, obviously go and get Dr. Kavin Mistry's book. It is awesome, a great book, and obviously you're going to learn all about it in the rest of the episode. So I'll stop talking and let's get back to the episode.
Absolutely. Jack, and you put that really nicely. And you mentioned Ozempic and it's a tool. I don't put down pharmaceuticals because I never say never because there are applications that for some of these drugs, and somebody, if they've seriously overweight and they're just in a mode where their metabolic health is very, very poor, very poor insulin control, in which case that there is the sense of urgency where something like Ozempic will really drop their weight and then bring them into a zone where now they can implement practices that will really enhance their health. And so for those cases, I would say it's a good thing, right? But my problem is when you have a individual who is very capable
Mm,
of implementing a lot of these rituals and practices that I talk about that to drastically improve their health. But they don't do that, and you don't form a core base of your health, and you want to jump quickly to the solution to give you that aesthetic of looking younger and healthier in
mm,
terms of, maybe less weight and more fit in terms of, I guess, maybe more lean. But does that really mean you're healthy? Does
mm,
that really mean your biological age is improved? I beg to differ, correct? I mean, I mean, you're in this field that just that parameter, just by losing your fat percentage does not mean your muscle percentage is more, right? I mean, percentage in relative percentage, yes, but it doesn't mean you have more muscle mass just because you improved which takes time, it takes effort to build that muscle, to build that functional strength. And that is going to be the driver of have you age, you know. And this brings to us to the aspect of what you mentioned is that there's one aspect of lengthening our age in terms of lifespan. Then there is the health span, is how healthy you're aging through that process, right?
mm, mm,
And what I tell people is that if you do nothing, and you just go with the flow, and particularly I'm sure Australia is very similar to United States, right? Just let's just take statistics and let's just take the average, right? And you look at how people's vitality peaks around 30, 35. And then there is this very steep downward curve, that goes. So by the time people hit their 40s and 50s, they really feel less vital in terms of energy. They start moving less. They have the loss in muscle. There was, very accelerated sarcopenia in terms of muscle loss. Hormones decline because they're not in alignment to everything like that. And so you go from this, what I call as peak performance zone, which what you were in your 20s and 30s, to this just activities of daily living zone where now you're not in peak performance, you're not going mountain biking, you're not doing all these things that are fun to do, you're just surviving, you're just kind of going through the motions of the day. And people drop from that peak performance zone to that activities of daily living zone very quickly. Like in their
Mm,
50s, they're entering that.
mm,
And I want to change that. What I want to impress upon people is that if you are in the cockpit of your genome and you have the access to flip all these switches on, why would you not try to turn on all the switches that help you and stay in that peak performance zone into your 80s, 90s? Okay. And we've seen people do that. We've seen people remain in that peak performance mode for their whole lifetime, and then they, in these primitive cultures, you have these elders that are walking around picking tubers and doing squatting and doing everything well into their 80s and 90s, and then they get old and die, and that's the way it should be. Okay.
mm.
And I don't think you need to have a muted life starting in your 50s. That makes no sense.
Definitely not. Definitely not. Uh, I think your analogy of the switches with the genes is really good. I agree, and you can definitely switch them on. But like, obviously, there's going to be good and bad switches. Can you switch the bad ones off?
So we can avoid those switches. And what I tell people is, so the concept here, that in terms of switches, we're talking about the concept of epigenetics,
Mm,
right? And there's initially, when I started doing this research, I came across this paper on epigenetic drift. And what it mentioned was there was a set of twins, twin A, twin B. Both had predisposition to Alzheimer's because they had a very strong family history of Alzheimer's, which meant that they were going to develop Alzheimer's early. And they were going to develop it because of the genetics, and they were going to develop it early. Twin A said that, okay, that's just my bad luck. My genes are bad, and this is my fate, and I'm just gonna, this is what it is. And did really was not proactive, which is kind of how most of Americans are, right? You just kind of say, hey, this is my life, this is what it is, and I'm just gonna, go with the flow. Twin B said no, she said that, I'm going to do everything in my power to counteract this in terms of diet, in terms of everything that I can find. And interestingly, when they did the Alz when with Alzheimer's, there are specific diagnostic tests and whatnot, which really tells you, okay, now you have Alzheimer's, right? So when, in terms of the confirmed diagnosis, twin A was confirmed at age 62. Twin B was 83,
mm,
had developed Alzheimer's at 83. So what you're looking at, 20 years. Now, both had the same genetic makeup, both had the same predisposition to Alzheimer's. But if you think about what twin B did, is said that, no, I'm going to turn on the right switches. And that gap is what we talk about, these epigenetic drift. But now
mm.
you take somebody who has a healthy genome, right? And think about, if you're in the cockpit of your genome and you have access to all these switches, and you become proactive, think about what you can do with your health. And it's just phenomenal. And so that's what really turned me on into this idea of really implementing daily rituals and whatnot, that really brings us back to how we were designed, and to our primal connections.
I love that, and that story of the twins. Like that's a great example. And that extra 20 years, that's what fires me up and gets me excited, and that's why I want to help people. Uh, that, that is a massive difference. I don't think people realize how impactive that is on your life. No, unfortunately, that same gene runs in my family, so I'm doing everything I can now to again get those 20 years back later in life and all that sort of stuff. So it's inspiring for me, and that's why I want to inspire others to do it. But you got the example of the two twins there. One twin was just like, whatever, don't care, just jump in the rat race. And the other's obviously done a lot to flick on all the right switches. Awareness is a big thing. So how can we make that twin A who didn't really care a little bit more enthusiastic about their later years?
Jack, that's a great question. And People ask me that a lot,
Mm,
that how do we raise this awareness? And part of it is that that's my whole work. But one aspect is medicine right now in US, same in Australia, is very is a reactive medicine model if you look at it.
mm,
And what I mean by reactive is that we wait till the problem erupts and then try to fix it. So you get that shoulder pain, and then we try to figure out, we do an MRI, figure out it's a rotator cuff tear, and then we try to rehab it and then go there. But by the time you show up with a shoulder pain and get an MRI and I read it, it's too late because you've done the damage already.
mm.
So reactive medicine, it doesn't work because it doesn't prevent that damage from occurring because it's too late by the time you get the diagnosis, right? So I say that we need to have a proactive health model. And what I mean by proactive is what if you went to a doctor and they did a battery of tests, and there are many things we can check in terms of your telomere length and DNA methylation and many things like that. That's kind of in this world of longevity and health, reversing biological age that we can test. And now there are many more kind of panels that people can run and whatnot. But what if your doctor told you that, listen, Jack, this is based on your labs, this is what your health curve looks like. Okay. That means based on your current lab tests, your performance is going to start, you're going to cross the line of peak performance and enter this kind of activities of daily living zone in at 55 if you do nothing. But if you change X, Y, and Z, we can flatten this curve and we can keep you in this peak performance stage, maybe into your 70s, maybe into your 80s. Um, would you like to make these changes? And would you like to know how? Wouldn't that impress you and say, hey, I take choice B?
Yeah, yeah. I wish that happened more. Um, let's dive into the book. You got it sitting there, the Primal Health
Yeah,
Design. What are the 7 points that people should be focusing on? And then we'll dive in each one a little bit deeper.
sure. So very broad overview. So I go into 7 paradigms, but the way I explain the model is I tell people that you have to start from the inside out. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's very important to get your foundation right. And the first part of your foundation is getting your physical health optimized, okay, which I know you're all about, and I saw some of your videos, and you're doing these weighted one-legged lunges, and I was like, yes, I love that exercise. And so the first three paradigms, connection with earth, body, and food, address this idea of really strengthening your physical health, okay? And we'll talk more detail about how we do those connections, okay? But that's the first paradigm. And I tell people that it's extremely important because connecting with when we optimize these three paradigms, when you make those connections, you're lowering inflammation, you're optimizing your hormones, particularly for male in terms of growth hormone, testosterone. You're getting your alignment right, which reduces pain, increases energy. You're optimizing your mitochondrial health, mental performance. So all of this comes into play into that first three paradigms and that physical dimension. Okay. I think when you have this under control, then you can move a layer out, which is your mental health dimension. And mental health and what I find that, people right away want to meditate. But I say, you know what? Before you meditate, let's just make sure you're sleeping well. Make sure you're eating well, because if you're not, for you to try to meditate when those parameters are not right, it's just impossible. You cannot do it. Okay. No matter how wonderful the instructor is, you will not be able to experience what they're trying to get you to do because you just haven't slept and you just physically are not there and you're just eating foods that are causing all this inflammation. So you understand my point, right? So you
100%.
have to get a handle on this physical dimension before you can really even step into that mind-body connection. But let's assume that you do have a handle on the physical connection. That's where we enter the fourth paradigm, which is the mind-body connection, and which is where clarity develops, which is where we understand that our brain is malleable. We're not born with one brain and it just starts deteriorating. We can, we through neuroplasticity, we can rewire our brain anytime we want through learning something new. We can increase our BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor, create new connections. We can improve our brain and many, many benefits of that. So that to enter that realm, that is the fourth connection, mind-body connection. And I think when you have the physical paradigm, physical health and your mental health down, most health and fitness industry stops there. But
Hmm.
I think that when you have those things down, you can then actually step out into a bigger layer, and which is the emotional health. And this is where I think a lot of young adults in Australia as well as US are in misalignment. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is I believe that all of us have a unique gift and all of us have a unique constitution. In my Asian culture, we believe that people fall into certain categories, at least four different categories, where certain people are creators, right? They're physical creators. They create art, they create music. Some people are the thinkers, right? The mathematicians. Maybe I fall into that category. I think of ideas and things like that. And then some people are connectors and they connect with people and they are like they have a very high emotional quotient and whatnot. And then some people are the spiritual leaders where they can think and connect with the beyond and then really bring that to people. And most people have, in my culture, we believe a predominance of one of these things. And if you're not connecting with that primal quality within you, you're going to feel suffocated and it's going to cause this misalignment in your life. And what I mean by that is, Jack, let's say you are a creative artist. Let's say you're just really good with art in terms of graphic design and just typography and everything like that. And we put you in a investment banking career, and now you're making all this money and you have all this wealth and all day. You're going to be in your 50s and 60s sitting one day and go, I got this job that pays me well. I have all this money, but it's just not there. And that's
Hmm.
because your primal quality of creation, of that creativity is suffocated. And I think that that's a big misalignment that people face. And that's so the connection five is connection with your purpose. Is that really what is that within you? That term we call ikigai, if you've heard that term, right? With what is something you love to do, that you're good at, that the world respects, and that you can get paid for. The convergence of all those four is the Japanese term ikigai. When you can find that, you form this alignment which drastically improves your health. We've seen this across the world when people engage with a vocation that fits those criteria, their stress level goes down, their longevity goes up, their telomere length improves. It's phenomenal. So it's one of the main longevity drivers in these cultures is finding that drive. And what I found is that as soon as you connect with that purpose, when you connect with your primal purpose, you automatically become more attractive to people because it's and you can ask women across the board and they'll say what is the most attractive quality you find in a man. And what and I've asked this in an audience, and apart from obviously you want the guy to be good looking and all that, right? Like the aesthetics and then the build and all that. But if you, from a qualitative point of view, if you ask a woman what attracts you to a man, she will always say she wants a man who's who is going somewhere, who has
Mm.
direction in their life. Okay. And so when you find that purpose, you become innately attractive, not only to women, but just to people around you. And automatically that develops a tribe, that develops a community around you. Okay. And one of the things, and you mentioned this before, is that we're seeing this loneliness epidemic, right? We're seeing people digitally connected, but emotionally disconnected from people. And the part of that is because you're kind of in this shell and trying to trying to do everything, but you're not able to attract people, you're not able to connect to people. So those two things, connecting with yourself innately leads to connection with others, and those two together form that emotional health dimension. And I think it's extremely important. Okay.
Mm.
And when I hit that stage, I thought this was it. And I was like, this is it. This is the recipe. And and I actually then uncovered that there is actually a final layer that actually is the capstone on everything. And it only came after I lost both my parents in a short amount of time a few years ago. And after my parents passed away, and my mom passed first, my dad passed, and I was looking at my dad's phone to find pictures for the funeral service and everything like that. Most people have like 5,000 pictures on their phone and whatnot, right? So I'm looking through his phone, and Jack, I find like he had 5 pictures, just 5 pictures, and I go, I know he had thousands of pictures. How come he has 5 pictures? I'm so like, what is? So I'm looking at the pictures, and first picture was him and my mom. Second picture was my family. Third picture was my brother's family. Fourth picture was what he worked towards his life in terms of being a business leader and really committing to. And the fifth picture was his one of his religious places, right? And what I tell people is this, and maybe the audience is that ultimately it's going to come down to really what is that contribution you're going to leave behind, right? And after all this, you get healthy, you're meditating, and you're like this mental god and everything like that. Let's say you're just primed all this. But ultimately, where is all that leading to? It's going to be that one thing, that impact you live on the world. And I think that when I saw those pictures, I said, Really, it boils down to the 3 to 5 things that you're going to leave behind." And when you can zone in on that, I believe it makes all this journey worthwhile. And so that's the seventh paradigm.
Uh, Kevin, thanks for sharing that story. I'm sorry to hear about your parents, but I appreciate you telling that story because that's exactly like it sounds like your parents reached that point of living a long, healthy, happy life. And that's exactly what we're aiming for. Uh, so the recipe you're saying, it's just timely for me hearing how you are explaining that. I've been finding all these different pieces of the recipe or puzzle, but however you want to say it, and I've been struggling to think about how to actually put them all together, and you just explained it perfectly. So again, appreciate that. Thank you very much. Uh, because you sort of mentioned the banker at 50, he's lived his life doing the thing and he wasn't really connected with his primal instinct. And, one day you just sort of go, oh, I've just wasted 40 years or whatever it is. I think that's happening younger and younger. And I think that's why we have this epidemic of loneliness and sadness and disconnection from people's purpose and mind and body. So I like how you sort of explained you've got to start with, you know, start at the basics. Everybody wants that purpose straight away and they want that drive and they want that successful life, spiritual connection, all that sort of stuff. But you have to go back to the basics. So let's go back to the basics. Where should people start thinking about if they're, again, whatever age it is, like I said, it's happening at all different ages. People are like one day just waking up and going, this isn't me. I need to change. What should I do?
Right. And if somebody and I did personal coaching for quite some time, and when people approach me, and I would say, let's start at the basics. Let's get you feeling good, right?
Mm,
Because if you're not waking up with energy, you're just not going to make right decisions, right? Can you imagine? Remember that time where like you just didn't sleep at night and the next day you just cannot make a right decision. Forget about making healthy lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get out of the brain fog, right?
Yeah.
We just want people first step, I think, is just get out of that fog. Let's just defog your life, and develop some sort of a ritual and healthy routine to start and end your day. And what I begin with
Mm.
people is that I say, for most people, I give them a sort of a suspension bridge model. And I said, if you look at a suspension bridge, here when we go from New Jersey to New York, we hit a lot of like very uh, iconic suspension bridges. One is like the Verrazano's Narrows Bridge. You got the Golden Gate Bridge on the West
Mm.
Coast. And you look at it, it's such a marvel of engineering where you have just these two endpoints, right? You have the beginning of the bridge and the end of the bridge, and that's holding the whole bridge up. There's no other support, right? If you think about it, it's just two supports holding up this whole massive bridge. You got all these tons of cars and 18 wheelers going on, and you're like, how is this happening, right? Think about the engineering that went in that. And I say that that's how your day is.
Mm.
That how you begin your day and how you end your day are your two pillars. And in between, all hell can break loose, right? Your car doesn't work. You got like, situations at work and this and that, and families, things like that happening, whatever. But if your beginning and the end of your day is locked in, you have your suspension bridge, you can take any load on there. So that's what I start. I want to impress upon people and say that let's work on developing your AM and PM routine. Let's dial in all these
Mm.
parameters. Yeah.
Great analogy. Great analogy. Love that. So what can we do in the morning? And then we'll go to the evening.
Right. So one thing I would say is it's because I've been asked this so many times, I created a more detailed PDF, okay, which I will share at the end, and people can download a morning routine that I recommend, okay,
Perfect.
which will have more details to that. We'll probably touch upon some of it here, but
Hmm.
people can get a more kind of well-written PDF which we created. In the morning, I think that I talk about the big five that are very, very important, okay? And the big five S's, okay? If that's an easy way for people to remember, is I say sun, soil, sleep, spinal alignment, and the last S is what we call is sattvic food. Sattvic is a Ayurvedic term meaning life promoting food. Okay, so those are the key fives that I think people should begin with. Okay, so which means that you begin with getting sunlight. Okay, connecting with the earth. Okay, and aligning your body so that it is prepared for the day. And I'm sure Jack, you can probably embellish that much further in terms of a lot of your work that you do. But from my perspective as a radiologist and what I see on my film, is that the things that people suffer the most, one is neck pain throughout the day, okay, and low back pain. And
Hmm.
and that's what people present to for neck MRIs and neck CTs and low back pain and lumbar spine MRIs and everything like that. And it stems from straying away from our primal alignment. And so I think when you begin your day, you have to do things that keeps and strengthens your neck and keeps it in alignment. That's number one. The other thing that works really well for people, and I do it personally, is I do a static hang every morning.
Mm.
And it's people don't realize how hard it is until they actually do it. But if people can get to 30 seconds, that's a good start. But ultimately, you want to be able to get to a static hang where you can hang for about 2 minutes. And if you can get there, you will have built enough of your upper back and where during the day you will not round your shoulders as much and your back will stay more aligned and it will decrease the incidence of that upper back pain, mid back pain, and neck pain that people notice. And the last thing I would say that I do every day is I do a deep squat while my water is warming up. And I'm not talking just a barbell squat going down. I'm talking a primal squat, ATG, ass to grass squat, right? Where I and and it's interesting because the when I was in Africa and hanging out with these tribes, the squatting was a restful posture. You would see these elders, they would just be in a squat and talking and making meals and you know cutting up tubers or whatever and they were in a squat and it was just a matter of fact. It's like the way we sit on a chair. They're sitting in a squat, and a lot of times, it's funny because like I became so used to squatting, because of that. And that to me is a restful posture. And it's come from just years of just being very comfortable in that position.
Mm.
Uh, and a lot of times at work, I would like be looking at a film and I'll just kind of put, rest in a squat. To me, it's a restful position. And now you'd see other doctors come, they're like, wow, you can get down to a squat and you can come back up. I said, okay, why can't you do that? They're like, we got too much pain to do that. And I go, wow, how much have people strayed from their primal alignment and just the primal movement. So again, that's a good start for people.
Yeah, love that. I'm that person as well that always goes down into a squat when there's a group of people around and not much has happened, and I'm just over in the corner or just in the circle having a squat.
Yeah, I think it's such a relaxing position, right?
Oh, it feels good as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to see when people get together chatting, everybody's down in a squat. Uh, so let's go to the evening. Touch on a few things that people should pay attention to when winding down for sleep.
Right, right. So with the evening, I think the most important aspect here, okay, is that we want to prepare our body for sleep. And we know that sleep is the superpower of your health. Okay. And then I covered that in the five S's as well, right? And really, how you begin your day is also going to determine how you end your day. Because if
Mm,
you have
100%.
movement, if you have movement during the day, you're going to have better sleep. We know that when you use ATP, right, which is the energy currency, the adenosine, so ATP is adenosine triphosphate, the adenosine that is dislodged or from that ATP, that there are adenosine receptors in your body. And when that adenosine, so when you spend this energy moving and doing things, that adenosine binds to those receptors, and that gives you what we call a sleep pressure. That's what makes you want to go to sleep. Okay.
Mm,
And so if you've seen and you study that what are who sleeps the best? If I was going to ask you, like if you look at across the world, what population sleeps the best? And if you take a survey, you'll find that apart from these primal cultures, which, I mean, they're doing many, many things that are correct, but apart from that, are people who are manual labor, involved with manual blue collar workers and farmers. And
mm,
farmers, if you ask them 9, 10 o'clock, it's like they hit the bed and they're just gone. They're
mm,
just asleep because they've had tremendous physical activity where they've built up so much sleep pressure they can fall asleep right away. So what I want to say is that early getting your early part of your day is just as important for that evening part to happen correctly. Okay. So assuming that all this has happened, you've got sunlight exposure, you've got activity. Now you enter that evening period. What we don't want to do is screw up all the benefits that we've garnered during the day. And how can we screw it up? Okay. One is that during the evening, most people like to engage with technology, right? During that last hour. And all that blue light exposure from the phones and screens and everything like that. And if you're taking your phone to your bed, bad practice, I would change that
Mm.
right away. Um, that blue light. So one is if you've done all the work up to this point right, you're going to screw it up by having that blue light exposure, which will not allow your melatonin to rise, which will not allow you to fall asleep. Okay. And we know that that natural melatonin increase in your body is what gives you that natural dive into sleep and what gets you into deep sleep. So titrating our more evening routine so that one, we are optimizing it for sleep. The second aspect is one is falling asleep, which is a melatonin thing. And the second part is staying asleep. And why
Mm.
do people wake up? Some people fall asleep, but then they wind up waking up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and then they're up and then they're looking at the clock and they're going, what? I got to wake up tomorrow. I got to do this and that. And I'm up at 3:30. And I've done that. So I'm speaking from experience, more than anything else. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating when you look at the clock at night and you're like, oh my God. And what I found is that it's all dependent on your um, level of anxiety and your cortisol level when you're falling asleep.
Mm.
What I found is that any certain practices that lower your cortisol, for me, it's conscious breathing, and that really brings down my cortisol right before going to sleep, and that keeps me asleep, so I can fall asleep effectively and stay asleep. So two factors there.
So yeah, love that. And just doing a little bit of mindfulness before you go to bed just to reduce that anxiety.
Reduce anxiety, decrease that cortisol, and so you're in a better climate to stay asleep.
Mm. This is probably going to take us off on a massive tangent, but I wanted to ask, so when it comes to movement, like you said, it's very important. And like when I get people that don't exercise much or have very sedentary lifestyles and they do some exercise, they're like, "Oh, I was so tired that night." I'm like, "Yes, good, keep doing it." And people can almost self-regulate that as well. Like it's like, "Oh, well, when I exercise, I'm tired, so I can sleep." So I think that's a good example for people. But just when it comes to exercise, if we go back to the tribe in Tanzania, when they get joint pain or they have an injury or any sort of niggle in their body, what do they do? Again, I assume the US is the same because we Australia generally follows. But as a personal trainer, when I'm coaching people or talking to people in the gym and they have some sort of niggle in their arm, it's like, well, I can't do anything. I can't move. I can't, I've just got to rest. I'm like, well, no, you still got to move. You still got to do things. So again, going back to that tribe that don't take any medication, I'm assuming they don't have painkillers, all that sort of stuff. What
Yeah.
do they do?
So, Jack, one thing we got to keep in mind is when, for example, if people connect with the earth, when let's say you have a wonderful workout and you're sore, what we've seen is that when people connect with the earth, which means that have contact, let's say grounding in terms of, let's say walking barefoot on grass or connection with soil, your level of inflammation goes down and you recover faster. So one of the things that these tribe innately they're just connected with the land so much that their level of recovery is so efficient compared to the standard of what we think about recovery. So not that they don't have injuries, but their level of recovery is so much faster because everything is so primal. Okay. So sunlight exposure, connection with grounding, that decreases your inflammation and improves recovery dramatically. Okay. And so
Mm.
these are, I guess, hacks. I don't want to, I don't, it's kind of like insult to these primal practices. I don't want to call them hacks because they're just what we were designed to do. But these primal practices will help people recover faster. Okay. So when
Mm.
people are going through this aspect of joint pain, the second thing is what you mentioned is that, you know, the culture is that I get hurt and I'm going to like now rest and not move, right?
Mm.
But in these cultures, they don't have that luxury of not moving because they
True.
get hurt and the next day they have to get their food. They have, that is their meat, they have to gather their food or hunt their food. So what are you going to do? Do you starve or you go with the knee pain and do what you need to do? So they're just constantly moving. And one of the things, in fact, one of no, there's a recent research paper and it talks about knee pain. And what it said was that one of the main drivers of knee pain has to do with, how much you sit and how your angle is when you walk. And it was interesting because when people sit and have decreased glute activation and glute atrophy, it changes their gait angle. And when
Hmm.
their gait angle changes, you develop knee pain. And most people don't. It's such a counterintuitive thing. But think about this culture, this primal culture. They're constantly squatting. They're not sitting. So their alignment in terms of their knees and everything like that is very primal.
Mm.
It's very much, it's where, it's the way it should be. So the incidence of knee pain is so low because they're constantly moving and they're aligned the way their body was designed.
I think people get that wrong, and I'm probably guilty of pushing this. Obviously, I'm in the fitness industry. I'm a personal trainer. I want people to exercise, but exercise is almost like it's not as important as the recovery. And I think what a lot of people get wrong is they focus, they've got an hour for a workout. That's awesome. And you want to get as much out of it as you can. But then it's like, what are you doing outside the workout? Are you recovering? Like that's more important than the actual workout. And I think people sort of get that mixed up because people will have a great workout, but then they'll go back and sit at the chair, sit at the computer, eat some bad food, all that sort of stuff, and not actually recover and not get the benefits from the workout. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. The Tanzanian
Absolutely. And,
tribe.
and Jack, to add to that, and then you bring up a great point is that, as a personal trainer, you're giving them this great workout experience and maybe you're pushing them and they've really, developed those micro tears in their muscles and then their body's sort of primed to grow now, right?
Mm,
But now that's the first part of the equation. Now, the second part of the equation is the recovery and the muscle growth, which is kind of on them, right?
mm,
And when we know that all these parameters, so part of it is sleep, which is where a lot of your muscle growth happens, a lot of where your growth hormone is released, right? We know that, obviously keeping yourself in a mode where you are in an anabolic state, right? If you have a workout, for example, and you are stressed out for the next 2 days, right? With just doing things and then just stressing your body in terms of staying up late, eating inflammatory foods, whatnot, right? Your cortisol level is going to be high and you're going to have very little muscle growth because you just are not putting your body in an anabolic state. You just cannot, your body's not in that rest recuperate mode. It's in a stress fight or flight mode all the time.
mm.
And so, and you hit the nail on the head by saying that your job is just 50% what you do with the clients, but then they have to take care of the rest of the 50% in terms of the recovery.
I like the generous 50%. I usually say 10%, and then I've got 90% to work on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's go into food. How does food fit into this? And what should people
So
be thinking
food,
about?
I would say many things to talk about that. We could do a whole
Mm,
podcast on this.
yeah. Yeah.
But from my perspective, and I would say the two big takeaways for food from my perspective. One is that we know that when we eat whole foods, that your mitochondria are optimized and that you have high energy. And when you have high energy, you can have high intensity in terms of performance, in terms of whatever you're doing. Okay. Let's say you're playing sports. Let's say you have a job that requires high performance. Let's say you want to work out with intensity. It's going to require energy. And what's driving that energy is really, are you eating in a way that promotes that mitochondrial health, that promotes that energy? And what I find is that when we're eating for our palate and not for our mitochondrial health, that's what we run into. And I'm not against eating savory and tasty meals. And I think that, you know, New Jersey has great pizza places, and if you come, you got to go to some of them, Jack. Um, but that cannot be my norm, right? So I usually tell people to have a 80-20 approach. I would say
Mm.
that 80% of your week should have whole foods. And in fact, I even tell people when you design a plate, let's do it 80-20. Let 80% should be whole foods. Let's say you have greens and you have veggies and you have like legumes and other things, and then the 20% could be whatever you decide. Let's say something processed, food. But the rest of the 80% should be a single ingredient whole food. And it could be a piece of chicken. I mean, that still counts as that whole food, right?
Mm.
But that 20%, we give you some play, put something that maybe is semi-processed or whatnot. But a general strategy like that, what it does is that because that 80% is whole foods, you're optimizing that mitochondrial health, you're optimizing your energy, that optimizes your intensity, performance into workout and everything like that. And when you skip on that, when you start eating many things that are inflammatory, okay, and let's say instead of that, you just ate a slice of just three slices of pizza, that was the meal. Now we've introduced a lot of things in there in terms of like the cheese and everything like that that promotes inflammation may not be the most optimal thing, okay? Versus you could
Mm.
have a slice of pizza and then the rest of the 80% could be more whole foods, then you could kind of enjoy the both. So I'd like to give people that leeway because um, it's more acceptable and it's more something that it's more of a paradigm that people can stick with. I don't like to put people on a diet. I don't think a diet to me is a transient term. A diet means that,
Mm.
oh, I'm going to be on a diet and then at some point I'll be off the diet. Then I'll be back to myself again. So what's the point, right?
Yep.
Why don't we just have then more of a mindset and a paradigm shift that you can carry into your 80s and 90s. So that one part is important. The second part I think that is you got to think about is our body is more microbes than human cells. We have more microbial cells than human cells. And they determine really our health and energy and hormone production. So you got to think one is, are we feeding our mitochondria and are we feeding our microbiome? And the microbiome thrives on fiber and soluble, insoluble fiber and many other things. And so it is very, very important to include foods that feeds the gut microbiome and then introducing things like cultured, let's say fermented foods and things like that. So those two things, I would say, I mean, many, many layers to this, but those two things, I guess, take the top, row on eating right.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's enough for people to focus on. As I've gone through this, and we'll go into the next bit in a second, but I want people to realize that are listening, this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. I've been doing this health and fitness thing for a long time, and there's still things I
Right.
need to work on. So it's not like it's just you get to the point one day and it's like, oh, that's fixed. Oh, it's done. Like you can get it to the best point you can, but it's something you're always going to be working on. It's a journey that you're always evolving. So it's not just going to happen overnight. Just be patient, work with it, and yeah, take your time with it. That's all I'd say.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love the way you put it. It is a journey, and
Yeah.
we're building out these different layers, and I think that having don't have that diet mindset. Have a more of an approach, a paradigm
Mm,
shift. That
100.
makes sense.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't like the word diet either because it sort of gives you that, it makes you think of an endpoint, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Yep.
stop eating this good food. Like, just have a moderation. 100%.
Correct. Correct. Love it.
All right. So we've got our movement, sleep, food under control. What should, like, people be thinking about next?
So one of the when all these things are sort of handled and you have some control over this, one of the things people struggle with in this day and age is digital distraction. I think that's a big thing. And what I tell people is that if you check your messages right now, your iPhone, you'll see that they're either drawing you towards something about the past. Something is like, hey, this didn't happen. We didn't get this done, or it'll be something about the future. Oh, make sure in October we got this thing coming up. So it's always about some regrets of the past or some anxieties of the future, right? It's always this ping pong that we're playing between here and here and here and here. And what I tell people is that in that ping pong, we miss the beauty of the present that's unfolding right now in front of us.
Mm, mm,
And and what I find that when we're playing that ping pong all the time, we stay in this chronic anxiety state. And what we found is that chronic anxiety, one, it keeps our cortisol high, which means, less muscle growth, less energy, all that. But from a longevity point of view, we know that chronic anxiety decreases our telomere length, which also has to do with how long we live, right? So not only are you impacting your current energy and muscle growth and everything like that, but you're also impacting your overall longevity by being in that ping pong game. Okay. And so what can people do? And is that you have to learn to break away from that regrets of the past and anxieties of the future and experience the present a bit. And
mm,
and one of the things that I found is there are many, many different ways to engage with that, okay? Is that how do you develop that clarity, that presence, you know?
mm.
And and why is that important? First of all, is that, Jack, when you're meeting with a client or let's say you're negotiating, right? When you're looking somebody in the eye, you can tell if they're present or not, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you, right? When you look at somebody's eyes, you can tell if they're there or not, right? And the sad thing is that a lot of young adults and teens, particularly, I look at them, they're just not there.
Mm,
It's that they're caught in this ping pong, right? And they're just not here. And to me, that is a bad sign because we're going to have these adolescents, these young adults become, and we're going to be in these careers where it will demand that presence, that connection with people, and you will just not have the bandwidth to have that. Okay. And so that whole chapter is dedicated to how do we develop a practice that starts building that muscle. But remember
mm,
what I said before, your brain is malleable. You're in control. Okay. You have this clay in your hand. Think of your brain as clay. And every day you have this opportunity to mold it. Okay. And let's say today you only find 2 minutes to meditate. And I don't even use the term meditation. Let's just call it focused attention because meditation is too heavy for people. But let's say
mm,
focused attention. Let's say we focus on something that's in the present. Let's say your breath. Okay. And can we sit for 2 minutes and just watch our breath? And if you can, it's going to be tough because initially you start, you're going to think about doing laundry. You got to pick up this. I got to call this guy. This guy hasn't called me yet. Your brain's going to be all over the place, but you draw back and you say, no, 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 I got to focus on my breath. and you play that game of doing these reps of your mind straying, bringing it back, straying, bringing it back. But when you start doing that, just for 2 minutes, that clay starts molding. Okay. And tomorrow you do it for 5 minutes. Next day you do it for 10 minutes. When people are able to maintain that focused attention for up to 20 minutes, what happens is you enter the state, what we call as transient hyperfrontality. Okay, your frontal lobe is right here. That's what is your doubting brain. That's the part that speaks with you and say, Jack, you cannot do this. What are you thinking? How come? It's the part that's always like kind of communicating with you. When that part steps away, your primal brain steps in, and that's when you experience flow. That's when you experience presence. That's when you can experience that stillness. Okay.
Mm.
And I think the greatest loss right now in this society is people are cannot feel that primal stillness, you know? And my one of my goals is to l- have people experience that. Because when people can taste that once, they'll realize that, wow, that is unbelievable. I need to do more of this. And
Mm.
so I don't promote meditation, but I just promote practices where people can drop into that state.
And I think like, I see that in exercise as well. Like sometimes when people are exercising, like they can't think of anything else other than the weight they're holding or the weight they're trying to push, and it almost forces them into that state. I don't know if that's a good thing to do, but and people are like, oh wow, like I feel so much better, and it's not necessarily the what. Yeah, there's chemical reactions, all that sort of stuff through exercise and all that sort of thing that help your body feel better, but it's also that mental clarity. I had a guest on recently that spoke about yoga, and he talks about holding poses and where your mind goes and how you can use yoga poses to find that mental clarity as well. So yeah, meditation, again, like you said, it can be too much for people, but there are definitely a lot of options out there.
Yes, yes. And then, what you mentioned is connecting with the present with body movement and connecting with your body and using it as a vehicle. And that works too, because if you're focused on movement, and that's where a lot of the work with Tai Chi
Mm.
and comes in, because you're so intentional about the way you move your hand, and that all your attention is drawn to that. And the journey, Jack, becomes going from anxiety to attention. And when you keep that attention there for some time, it blossoms into awareness. And it's a beautiful thing. And so my goal is to help people traverse that from that anxiety to attention to awareness.
And I know we spoke about, the sleep and everything first, but I think that's probably even more important, just getting people aware and trying to break that cycle so they can actually think about, oh, I do need to sleep a little bit better, or I do need to, you know, wake up and do certain things that help me achieve the day.
Absolutely. It was funny, Jack. I did this one uh, eh, webinar on sleep, and the whole topic was on sleep. And one of the things I told people is that one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that our body goes through a natural detox from 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. So the first half of our sleep detoxes our whole body and our brain. And the second half of our sleep has to do with memory consolidation in terms of remembering things, making connections, being creative, thinking of ideas, and everything like that, right? But most people just don't allow that full cycle to happen,
Mm.
right? So one of the things I challenged the group, that was on that night, and I said, just give me one day in the next 2 weeks. I want you to find one day where you can be in bed at 9:30. I said, I want you to set an appointment. Just say you have an appointment to go to sleep, cancel all plans, nothing, no TV, nothing. I want you to have dinner and then just prepare. I want you to be in bed at 9:30. Just give me one day and I want you to report back to me how you feel the next day. Okay. And I was like, I'm being realistic. I said, I'm assuming most of you are not going to do it, but maybe a couple of you will do it and we'll see what happens, you know? So a few weeks go by, and then this woman come, messages me. He goes, "You suggested that, and I actually set a date, and I was in bed at 9:30." And she goes, "I woke up the next day like a different person." She goes, "I did not even recognize myself." She goes, "I actually naturally woke up." And she goes, "I can't believe how much more energy, how much more clarity I had the next day." And she goes, like, I can't believe I've missed out on this my whole life, you know? And I was like, "Oh, okay, well," I was like, that's awesome. I'm glad you felt that. But that's how impactful sleep can be. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And people always ask me, like, what's the best supplements I can take to perform better or do this better?
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, don't worry about that. Just get some good sleep, and that'll be
Yeah.
way better than
Yeah, Let's
any other
let's
supplement you
start
can get.
there. Let's
Yeah.
start there first, right? Let's
Yeah.
start there first. Add the supplement later if you need it, but let's get this basics right. Absolutely.
Yeah. No supplements are going to work if your sleep and everything else is just out and
Oh,
you're not
yeah.
working on it. Um, so I usually wrap up with a question, and I still want to touch up on a couple more subjects if we've got time. But with this question, after the conversation, I usually know what the guest is going to say. But to be honest, I don't really know what you're going to say to this, what the answer is going to be to this question. So if you had control over every single human on planet Earth and they had to do one thing every single day for the rest of their life, but it had to be a practical thing, so it's something they actually had to do for the day, what would you get every single person to do?
Wow. That's a great question, and it's a tough choice to pick from, a tough list to pick from because there's so many
Yeah.
things. But the one thing, I would say that you we talked about optimizing our AM and PM. I would say that developing a level of stillness in your life, okay? From everything that I've done in terms of health and longevity, okay? Um, I would say two things that stood out to me and that has impacted me so much and on a daily basis. One is my stillness practice, is that when I can just calm down and stop playing this ping pong between the past and the future and the past and the future, and I can just slow down and experience stillness, even for 10 minutes. It changes, and I tell people that you don't practice stillness or meditation, let's see if you want to use that word, for the 20 minutes. You don't do it for the 20 minutes, you do it for the 23 hours and 40 minutes that it's going to change. And so when I do that 20 minutes of something, and I actually do have a 21-minute practice, it changes my 23 hours and 40 minutes so dramatically that I cannot skip on that. And I think that has
Mm.
been absolutely transformative for me. Okay. And if I follow that and couple that with optimal sleep, I would say that is a duo that is just unbelievable on many levels.
I, and I hear you say that 100%. I do that as well. It's sometimes not 20 minutes, like you said, sometimes it's just 2 minutes during the day. But when people hear, oh, 20 minutes, do I have to really sit there for 20 minutes? When people say they haven't got time for that, what's your reply?
And I agree. I said that I know you don't have time for that, right? But let's just say you have 2 minutes, okay, or 5 minutes. Give me that, okay? But here's what I know is that when people make it a practice and they do it for 2 minutes and then 5 minutes, that time interval will increase naturally because what you're doing is you're carving out this groove. Okay, we're talking about neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain and molding that clay. You realize that even when you mold it slightly, the next day it's it's taken shape, and the next day it takes more shape, and you deepen that groove. And what happens at some point is that you will hit that 2 minute mark and you go, wow, this feels so good. I'm going to just stay here a little longer. Okay. And and what I've found is that when I get to that state of that term that I mentioned, that transient hyperfrontality, and all it means is that being in the present and that clarity. After I hit that at that 20-minute mark, honestly, I could stay there for hours. For me, the only limiting factor is that I really have to get up and do something because I need to go to work and do something. But if I had the choice and I hit that mark, honestly, I could be there for 2, 3 hours because it is such a restorative place that when people experience it once, it's that you'll taste it and you'll go, wow, this is phenomenal.
Is that something you've always done?
It took some time. Honestly, it took time to get to that space. But it's something very sacred, and I hold that because it really, I believe that when you develop stillness in your life, it it, it impacts everything. It's the way you talk to people, the way you handle things, the way you answer questions, because you then answer from a place of stillness,
Mm.
right? And so it has given me that gap. When somebody says something to me, I have that natural gap where I don't react, but I rather have the ability to respond. And and so that gives me it is so it's such a powerful state in me that I can't let it go.
Yeah, that's again perfect timing. Last 2 days, I've been doing some mental health training to help people with mental health, and a big part of it is listening. And obviously, I do podcasts. I love to listen. I practice. I take it all in. And
Yeah.
I was trying to
Yeah.
pinpoint because the instructor's talking to the class, and I was looking around the class. Half the people are on their phone, half the people are scribbling on something. No one's really listening. And I'm like, this is the most important thing about helping somebody and having a discussion about mental health is listening. And I was trying to figure out what it is that helps people listening, and it's that it is that stillness practice each day. I reckon makes you a better listener, so you can actually be a better person and be a better friend, partner, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's a quality that you will carry with you
Mm,
and makes you more receptive to the world around you, and it's just I think your experience of life will be better because you're constantly not in this reactive mode. You will be in this proactive mode where you can say, oh, okay, this is what he said, but I have this choice of A, B, and C to respond or not respond at all. And and when you can place yourself in that position of having that space and that gap to think, it is very, very powerful and makes
mm,
you a better husband, a better parent, a better leader, better teacher, everything.
100% agree. Kevin, we've covered a lot, uh, and I strongly recommend people grab your book. Like we've only brushed the surface of the
Oh,
book on the
sure, yes.
topics we've covered in this podcast. Like you said, we could do a podcast on each and every one. But is there any final thoughts that you wanted to leave everybody with?
What I would say is that if people can wrap their head around the concept that they are in the cockpit of their genome and they have this opportunity to turn on these primal connections, okay? And I've tried to sort of put it in a model where people can understand and give like these 7 main primal switches, and there's much more depth to that in each of these chapters. But when you can wrap your head around that and you can say that, why are we going to do this? And what I say is that if you can change your trajectory from this average mm, curve where people start feeling joint pain at 50 and start forgetting things and then go from that peak performance to that survival mode.
Mm,
What if you can just flatten that curve and stay in peak performance till you're 80 or 90, I mean, how wonderful would life be to be able to be in peak performance up to that age? And we can do that. You have the capacity to do that. You have all these tools that we just talked about. You have these switches that you can turn on. And so I just want to empower people. I just want to say that have that mindset that, hey, this is in my control and I can act on it. Okay. And, if I can help you guys in that process via the book, my website has a download that you can you look get the morning routine that I recommend to people. Beyond that, I just have finished a course. It's a 21-day Primal Reset Program course, which is also on the same website. The website is primalhealthdesign.com that people can sign up for, and I can give them more information when the course officially launches. So right now we have people in beta testing mode and whatnot. And if people are really interested and they want to be a beta tester and say, I want this content now, please reach out to me via LinkedIn or email me. And then I'd be glad to kind of even share some content from that course. But there is like a one-on-one session where I take people through each of these connections with practical things they can do every day.
I love that. That'll be powerful for sure. Uh, you, I, again, I've been listening to longevity, been diving into longevity, health, fitness, all that sort of stuff for many years now. And even like you've blown my mind a few times through this episode. So like your recipe that you are giving out is definitely effective and it definitely makes sense. So I just recommend everybody grab the book, dive into your content, all that sort of stuff. I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can access it all. Dr. Kavin Mistry, thanks again.
Pleasure, Jack. Loved connecting with you, and I love your content and everything you're doing. And God bless, and just stay the course. And I think we're on the same mission.
100%. If I was to coach you for the next 30 days on your habits, your nutrition, your sleep, your fitness, do you think you'd feel like a new person? I see this all the time. People getting excited after watching a YouTube video, listening to a podcast or downloading a PDF. They have all this good information, but then they fail. A, because they don't know how to implement that information, or B, they haven't got anybody holding them accountable to implement that information in their day-to-day life. And that is exactly why I created the 30-day reset. So we can work together every single day for the next 30 days. I'm going to show you how to build a rock solid morning routine. Make a workout routine that fits into your life, that works for you instead of against you. How to eat for your goals without tracking calories. We're going to work on the fun stuff, stress management, sleep, and then we're going to build a strong mindset so these habits last well after the 30 days is done. I am obviously excited to help you in this next 30 days. So let's get started. Stop watching the YouTube videos, podcasts, all that sort of stuff, and let's just start making real change that lasts for the next 30 days and beyond. Okay, stop waiting. Let's get into it. Let's go.